more than 160 reported medium-range strikes. Over 65 logistics and ammunition depots hit. Dozens of drone control points, workshops and command posts targeted behind Russian lines. That was not just another drone strike on a road. It was a strike on the system that keeps Russia's southern war machine moving. Fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, military transports, and supply vehicles were reportedly part of this. After earlier Ukrainian attacks placed pressure on other crossings, including the Chonga area and routes around northern Crimea, Russian traffic had fewer safe paths left. Armyansk became more important. That also made it more exposed. If Ukraine's Leica 100 reconnaissance drone was watching the movement from above, then the convoy may have been identified. Once the target was confirmed, FPV drones might have been sent toward the road where Russian supplies were moving into Crimea. The danger for Moscow was simple. If those vehicles reached the peninsula, fuel and ammunition could keep flowing toward Russian forces, especially in the Zaporizhzhia direction and across the wider southern front. But if that route was slowed even for a short time, Russia's entire supply rhythm could begin to crack. This scenario is not only about one bridge or one convoy. It is about how Ukraine may be trying to change the battlefield without launching a major ground offensive. So the real question is this: did Ukraine simply hit a Russian convoy? Or did it expose how Russia's rerouting choices could turn Armyansk into a logistics trap? Armyansk was not a random target. It was one part of a wider Ukrainian effort to make Crimea harder to supply, harder to defend, and harder for Russia to use as a secure rear base. After earlier strikes placed pressure on other crossings, the northern edge of Crimea became more important. Roads that once looked like normal military supply lines began to look like narrow gates. Chonga, Perikop, Myrne, Stavki and Armyansk were no longer just names on a map. They became points where Russian movement could be watched, delayed and attacked. For Russia, this created a growing problem. Crimea still needed fuel, ammunition, spare parts, radar equipment, air defense missiles, engineering units, and reserve forces. These supplies had to keep moving because the peninsula was not only a symbol of occupation, it was also a military platform that supported operations toward Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and other parts of the southern front. On the other side of the battlefield, Ukraine has long-range systems that can hit deeper targets. These weapons can threaten airfields, fuel plants, command centers, and military sites. That is why the campaign around Armyansk matters. It was not designed only to create a fire on a bridge. It may have been designed to disturb the system behind Russia's front line. The pressure built step by step. When one crossing came under threat, Russian planners had to change traffic patterns. When another route became risky, vehicles had to move through fewer corridors. Convoys that might have been spread across several roads may have been forced to use tighter routes. Every adjustment helped Russia keep supplies moving, but it also made the next movement easier to predict. This is where Ukraine's method may have become dangerous. Instead of rushing into a large ground attack, Ukrainian forces could use reconnaissance drones to watch the movement from above. The change is not only about distance, it is about safety. Russian commanders once had more room behind the front to place supplies, move trucks, and organize troops. A depot several dozen miles back could support artillery. Russia tried to protect these routes. That meant radar coverage, electronic warfare systems, air defense positions, and security units around key crossings. But a protected road can still become a trap if too many vehicles depend on it. Air defense can watch the sky, but it cannot remove a traffic jam. Electronic warfare can break signals, but it cannot make a damaged crossing safe again. If movement slows, every vehicle behind may become part of the same problem. This is the hard lesson of modern logistics warfare. Ukraine does not always need to destroy every bridge or every truck. Sometimes the goal may be to make a route unreliable. That is why Armyansk became more than a point on the road into Crimea. It may have become a test of who controls the rhythm of movement. For Moscow, the problem is not one drone or one burned vehicle. The problem is uncertainty. If every depot behind the line might be watched, then every convoy needs more planning. And if this pressure continues, the real damage may not appear in one explosion. It may appear in slower convoys, longer detours, delayed repairs, and commanders near the front waiting for supplies that should have arrived earlier. If a bridge looks like only a technical target, the next part shows why Russia's own rerouting choices may have made Armyansk one of the most dangerous places for its logistics network. Russia may not have moved more traffic toward Armyansk because it wanted to take a risk. It may have moved there because earlier pressure around other crossings left fewer useful choices. After Ukrainian strikes placed pressure on routes near Chonga and other northern Crimea crossings, Russian logistics officers still had to keep the supply flow alive. Fuel had to reach Crimea. Ammunition had to move toward units in the south. Repair vehicles, military trucks, and reinforcement equipment could not simply stop because one route became unsafe. The war machine needed movement, and movement needed roads that were still open. That is where Armyansk became more important. It sits near one of the northern gates into Crimea, where traffic from Russian-controlled southern Ukraine can move toward the peninsula. If other paths became damaged, watched, or too dangerous for regular use, Armyansk could turn from a backup route into a main corridor. That change may look small on a map, but on the ground it could change everything. The first signs of that pressure would not be dramatic. A convoy might be told to leave later than planned. Another group of trucks might be ordered to use a different road. Vehicles that once moved in smaller groups may have been placed into a tighter flow because commanders wanted to push supplies through while the route remained open. Each decision made sense by itself, but together they may have created a pattern that Ukrainian reconnaissance could study. This may have been the shift at the center of the battle. Ukraine was no longer only choosing where to strike. Russia may have been pushed toward the places Ukraine was already watching. For a convoy crew, Armyansk may have looked like a path back into a more secure area. The drivers could see a road, a bridge route, and the promise of getting closer to Crimea. Fuel tankers and ammunition carriers were not built to fight their way through a front line. Their job was to move, arrive, unload, and keep the next Russian unit operating. The faster they passed through the choke point, the safer the mission seemed. But a narrow route changes the value of every vehicle inside it. A truck carrying shells is no longer just a truck. A tanker is no longer just fuel on wheels. A repair vehicle is not only support equipment. If they are forced into the same corridor, they become connected targets. Air defense is one of the most valuable targets in this chain. A Buk M2 or Panzer system does not only defend itself. It protects warehouses, bridges, ports, rail lines, and troop columns. That is why the rerouting decision may have been so dangerous. In the short term, it helped Russia keep supplies moving. In the same moment, it may have made those supplies easier to find. A road that absorbs more military traffic leaves more traces. Fresh tire marks may appear near turnoffs. Security vehicles may gather around key points. Drivers may wait in places where they should have moved quickly. From above, even small changes can reveal that something larger is happening below. Ukraine's answer may have been to watch the substitute routes, not only the damaged ones. A Leica 100 drone could follow the flow of vehicles near Armyansk and separate normal movement from a convoy with military value. It did not need to strike. It only needed to watch the convoy's movement. Once the traffic pattern showed fuel, ammunition, and support vehicles moving together, the road itself became the warning sign. So the question is simple. In modern war, what is more dangerous for an army? Losing one bridge or being forced to send its supply trucks into a road the enemy is already watching. The Leica 100 may not have needed to strike the convoy to change the battle. If it was tracking the route from above, its first job may have been to identify what the Russian column really was before Ukraine decided how far to go. From above, The reconnaissance drone may have watched the route that had become more sensitive after pressure on other crossings. At first, the movement could have looked like normal military traffic. A few trucks on a road, escort vehicles, and drivers trying to keep the supply flow moving toward Crimea. But then the pattern may have become harder to ignore. More vehicles entered the same area. Some may have been heavier than normal transports. Others may have moved like support trucks. Ukraine wants Russian commanders to feel that every movement into a hot zone carries a cost. Picture a Russian assault being prepared near a contested sector. A fuel truck can keep armor moving. An ammunition carrier can feed artillery. A repair vehicle can bring damaged equipment back into service. If these vehicles moved together, they were not just traffic. They became a mobile supply package for the battlefield. The Leica 100 may have kept watching. It could follow the direction of travel, note the spacing between vehicles, and help Ukrainian operators understand whether the convoy was heading into a vulnerable point. The drone did not need a perfect picture of every truck. It only needed enough evidence to suggest that this was not a small patrol or a random movement. It may have been a logistics column moving toward a route that mattered. That may have changed the value of Armyansk in that moment. The original pressure on the area could still damage a bridge or slow a crossing. But the convoy may have given Ukraine a larger chance. If the vehicles reached Crimea, their cargo could move deeper into the Russian system. So Ukraine may have had to decide when the convoy was most exposed. The better moment would be the point where movement, terrain, and traffic pressure work together. That is the kind of moment reconnaissance drones are built to find. The strength of modern UAV warfare is not only the strike, it is the waiting. A drone can turn a road into a screen of information. It can show which vehicles are moving first, which ones are falling behind, and where the column begins to tighten. This is why the Leica 100 may have mattered before the FPV drones entered. It may have given Ukraine time to read the convoy instead of reacting blindly. The operators could have seen that the target was not simply passing through Armyansk. It may have been moving through a place where a strike could do more than burn one vehicle. It could interrupt the entire flow. As the convoy moved closer to the key section, the decision window may have narrowed. Every minute that passed could give the Russian vehicles a chance to leave the exposed area. But every meter deeper into the route also may have made them more dependent on the same processing. That was the tension inside the operation. Wait too long and the convoy might escape. Strike too soon and the bigger trap might not form. By then, the mission may have changed. Ukraine was no longer only watching a road into Crimea. It may have been watching a supply column that could become trapped if hit at the right time. Crimea was not an open road for Ukrainian drones. It was a defended zone, and the Russian convoy may have moved toward Armyansk under the belief that several layers of protection still stood between it and a Ukrainian strike. Around the key routes into the peninsula, Russia had built a defensive screen. Radar systems watched the air. Electronic warfare units tried to disturb control signals. Short-range air defense covered important crossings. Security teams and escort vehicles guarded the roads where military cargo had to pass. The purpose was simple, but if that truck is moving from a known ammunition point toward a firing position, its value changes. If it is protected by radar and heading towards a sector, that defense may have made the mission harder, but it did not remove the basic problem on the ground. A convoy still had to move through a limited space. If the Russian vehicles approached the Armyansk area in a tight movement, the road and crossing zone may have begun to control their speed. Drivers could no longer move as if they were on a wide rear area route. The lead vehicles may have had to slow down. Escorts may have stayed close and support trucks may have had less room to adjust. At first, the column could still have looked organized. Vehicles may have kept their lanes. Escorts may have watched the road edges. But every convoy becomes more fragile when its speed drops. The space between vehicles starts to shrink. A truck that was safely behind another vehicle may become part of a tight chain. A tanker that should have had room to pull away may stay trapped behind the movement in front of it. This may have been the dangerous point for Russia. The convoy was not crossing an empty battlefield, but protection from above did not solve the narrowness below. Radar could search for drones, yet it could not widen the approach. Electronic warfare could make FPV control harder, yet it could not stop vehicles from bunching together when the route slowed. Air defense could guard the sky, but it could not guarantee that every small drone would be caught before reaching the road. For Ukraine, that meant the target may not have been only the convoy itself. The target may have been the moment when the convoy became compressed. The Leica 100 could help identify that change from above. It could show when the line stopped looking loose. That may have been the point where even a limited number of FPV drones could have a larger effect. The first Ukrainian decision may not have been to attack every vehicle. That would require more drones and more time. The smarter choice may have been to look for pressure points inside the movement. A strike near the front could slow the lead group. A hit near the center could split the column. A fire around fuel or ammunition trucks could force drivers to stop, reverse, or abandon the route. But the closer the convoy became to the crossing area, the more complicated defense may have become. That may have been the logic Ukraine needed to exploit. The strike did not have to defeat every Russian system at once. It only had to break through at the right moment when traffic density, limited space, and reaction time all moved against the convoy. Armyansk showed a hard truth about modern war. A protected route can still become vulnerable if too many valuable vehicles must pass through the same narrow place. The strike at Armyansk turned Russian logistics into the main target, and that was the real damage behind the explosions. If the convoy had already been identified, Ukrainian FPV drones may have moved from the role of a weapon into the role of a traffic breaker. Their purpose may not have been only to hit vehicles one by one. The bigger goal may have been to stop the convoy from completing its mission. A burning truck matters, but a blocked supply route matters more when fuel, ammunition, and military cargo are all trapped in the same area. The first impacts may have changed the situation quickly. Russian drivers had to react before they fully understood what was happening. Others may have tried to keep moving because stopping in a narrow corridor could be just as dangerous as taking a direct hit. According to Ukrainian reports, around 50 Russian military vehicles were hit or affected in the Armyansk area. The number is important, but the more serious question is what those vehicles were supposed to do. The main roads remain vital, but the secondary routes may become just as important. When Ukraine threatens a direct road, Russia can shift traffic to a smaller path. If repair vehicles could not pass, damaged equipment near the front could stay out of action longer. That is why the strike did not need to destroy every vehicle to become effective. A logistics convoy is useful only if it arrives. If the road became blocked, the mission may have begun to fail, even if some trucks remained intact. Nearby, an electronic warfare team tries to protect the convoy from drone control signals. On paper, the route looks protected. In practice, each layer creates another target. Then came the next possible problem for Russia. After the first phase of the attack, the response itself could create new targets. Engineers and recovery crews may have been needed to clear the route. Security teams may have had to protect damaged vehicles. Commanders would have needed to decide whether to pull the convoy back, push it forward, or hold it in place until the road reopened. Every option carried risk. If recovery vehicles entered the same narrow area, they could become visible to Ukrainian reconnaissance. If engineers worked too slowly, traffic would remain frozen. This is where Ukraine's method may have become clear. Kiev was not trying to win this fight with a frontal assault. It may have been using drones to reach the support system behind Russia's combat forces. For Russia, every new adjustment has a cost. A damaged bridge needs repair. A blocked route needs a bypass. A delayed convoy needs a new schedule. A replacement truck must be found if a vehicle burns. Even if the army keeps moving, it moves with more pressure, more risk, and less freedom. And that leads to the large question for the final part. If Ukraine can keep forcing Russian logistics into slower and more exposed routes, how long can Crimea remain a secure base instead of a permanent target zone? The strike near Armyansk may be remembered as a warning sign for Russia's entire logistics network around Crimea. Ukraine is no longer only hunting Russian armor near the front line. It is now looking deeper at the roads, bridges, fuel routes, and supply columns that allow those armored units to keep fighting. That is why Armyansk matters. After pressure on other crossings, Russia had fewer safe routes left, and each remaining road became more valuable. The reported damage to around 50 Russian military vehicles is serious. But the deeper issue is the mission behind those vehicles. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and reinforcement equipment are not just cargo. If that slows down, the pressure can spread from Crimea to Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and the wider southern front. In the coming weeks, Russia may try to repair damaged routes, add more air defense, increase electronic warfare, or move convoys onto smaller bypass roads. Ukraine, in return, will likely keep watching those roads with reconnaissance drones, such as the Leica 100, then strike with FPV drones or other precision systems when traffic becomes predictable. So, the question is still open. Is Russia adapting fast enough to protect Crimea's logistics network, or is Ukraine slowly turning every remaining route into another trap? Let us know what you think in the comments. If you found this battlefield breakdown useful, like this video, share it. And subscribe to Military Force for more clear updates on war, weapons, and the struggle for peace in a dangerous world.